You never know a good thing until it's gone. For Ethan Morgan, good was quiet, dependable, and always next door, until the day Dahlia walked away without looking back. Now, in the silence she left behind, Ethan must confront the truth he never dared to face. The love he needed wasn't the one that dazzled, it was the one that stayed. This is a story about absence, memory, and the slow, hopeful return to what matters most. Sometimes love doesn't knock. Sometimes it hums softly through the wall, and you don't hear it until it's gone. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The city never really slept, but at dusk, it had a way of softening. The sirens dulled to background murmurs, headlights swept across apartment walls like slow-moving ghosts, and the scent of rain on hot pavement drifted through open windows. Ethan Morgan sat on his faux leather couch, half listening to a podcast, eyes skimming emails he wouldn't reply to until morning. His laptop screen cast a faint bluish glow across the living room, bouncing off scattered coffee cups and a wilted houseplant in the corner. Another casualty of his forgetfulness. Somewhere next door, Dahlia was humming again. He could hear her through the wall when the apartment was quiet enough. It wasn't loud, just soft like the way wind played with wind chimes. Some old jazz tune or a folk song she probably picked up from one of her vinyl records. She always had music playing, and somehow it never annoyed him. Dahlia had lived in the unit beside his since college. They'd grown up 2 towns apart, met through mutual friends, and somehow ended up in the same downtown building after graduation. It wasn't intentional, at least not on his part. Life had just arranged it that way. She was reliable, in a world that rarely was. When he forgot his keys, she had a spare. When he burned dinner, again, she'd knock with leftovers already packed in Tupperware. On holidays when he couldn't make it home, she always left something at his door. A pie, a card, a tiny fake tree with string lights she claimed needed a foster home. They shared just enough without ever crossing a line. Friends, sure, but quiet ones. Dahlia was the kind of person who noticed things without needing to be told. She'd once handed him a new umbrella before he even realized his was missing. Ethan never thought too much about it. She was just Dahlia, part of the architecture of his life. Like the corner cafe that never changed their menu, or the crooked street lamp outside his window. That evening, as he closed his laptop and stretched, he heard a soft knock. He opened the door to find her standing there, holding a bowl wrapped in a tea towel. "You mentioned a sore throat yesterday," she said, offering him the bowl. "Ginger turmeric soup. Not pretty, but it works." "Thanks," he muttered, genuinely touched but too tired to show it. "You're a lifesaver." She smiled. "Just a neighbor." He watched her retreat to her apartment, humming again, the soft click of her door punctuating the silence. Ethan closed his own door and set the bowl on the counter, steam curling into the air. He didn't think about how often Dahlia showed up like this, how automatic it had become to expect her presence without acknowledging it. Why would he? Some things always felt like they'd be there. The office buzzed louder than usual that Friday evening. Someone had brought in champagne. The product team was celebrating another funding milestone. Ethan stood near the back of the room, nursing a half-full glass and pretending to care about someone's story about cryptocurrency. He was thinking about going home, until she walked in. Marissa Wolfe didn't just enter a room. She shifted it. She wore a crimson blazer like it had been stitched directly onto her confidence. Her eyes locked onto people like they were puzzles she'd already solved. Ethan had seen her before, in meetings, passing through the hallway, but never up close. And now she was walking straight toward him. "Ethan, right?" she asked, already certain. He blinked. "Yeah, that's me. I've seen your code reviews. Efficient. Clean. Slightly arrogant, but in a charming way." She smiled like she'd paid him both a compliment and a challenge. He chuckled, surprised by how easily she unsettled him. "I'll take that, I think." They ended up at a bar across the street 2 hours later, tucked into a velvet booth, sharing cocktails with names like Winter Smoke and Midnight Orchard. Marissa told stories in bursts, about growing up in Chicago, working in fintech, why she hated cilantro, and how she once broke a guy's heart in Barcelona because she liked his best friend better. She was energy in a bottle. Sharp, quick, dangerous. Ethan had never met someone so effortlessly electric. He didn't notice he'd missed Dhalia's text until the next morning. "Sunday breakfast? I've got new coffee beans to try." He stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then he put his phone down. He told himself it was just one breakfast. Dhalia would understand. The weeks that followed were a blur of rooftop parties, late-night sushi, and inside jokes with Marissa that burned hot and fast. She introduced him to things like spontaneous weekend trips to wine country and boutique whiskey tastings with her high-speed circle of friends. Ethan found himself wearing dress shoes more often than sneakers. He started leaving his apartment early and coming home later, smiling at texts he never would have sent 6 months ago. Dhalia still waved when they passed in the hall, still hummed through the walls. But her door stayed closed more often, and she stopped knocking. Once, she left a note on his door reminding him about building inspections. He crumpled it, not unkindly, just distracted. Life had momentum now. Movement. Excitement. He didn't notice how quiet the hallway had become, or how still his apartment felt once Marissa left. Ethan was chasing something dazzling. He just didn't know he was leaving something golden behind. Ethan didn't know when exactly the shine began to wear off. Maybe it was the night he brought up his dog, Charlie, who had passed 2 years earlier, and Marissa tilted her head and said, "You still talk about that mutt like he was a person." She laughed. He didn't. Or maybe it was when they were driving back from a winery just outside Napa. He mentioned a hiking trail near the coast that Dhalia had once shown him, and Marissa replied with a bored yawn. "That sounds quaint." There were more moments. Small, sharp ones. The kind that didn't shout but chipped. Like glass weathering over time. Ethan started coming home earlier. Not by choice, just by exhaustion. Marissa's world, so intoxicating at first, had turned demanding. Everything was a test. Where to go? What to wear? Who to impress? And he was always just a few steps behind her rhythm. By mid-December, he realized they'd spent 3 weekends in a row apart. She said she needed space. "You're stable," she told him during brunch one day. "Which is great, but also predictable, maybe?" Ethan tried not to flinch. He knew that word. Predictable. That's what Dhalia used to call him, teasingly, when he ordered the same thing at every restaurant. Only it sounded different coming from Marissa. Like an insult. He looked up one morning and realized the plant Dhalia had repotted for him 2 summers ago was dead, brown and curled in its ceramic grave. He tossed it in the trash. That same day, he passed her in the building lobby. She was wearing a long camel coat and holding a cardboard box. He slowed. "What's?" "I'm moving," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Ethan's heart stalled. "What do you mean? Moving where?" Dhalia gave a small smile, not unkind, not apologetic. "A new job. Teaching fellowship in Portland. Starts next month." "You didn't tell me," he said, almost childishly. "You've been busy," she replied, then paused. "Some people leave when they're no longer needed." He opened his mouth to protest, to say something meaningful, but nothing came. Just silence. The same kind he'd given her for months. She nodded once and walked past him, out the lobby doors, her boots tapping softly against the concrete like the fading of a metronome. It rained the morning Dhalia left. Not the cinematic kind with thunder or drama. Just a steady, cold drizzle that blurred the skyline and muffled the city's usual clangor. Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee he'd brewed too strong, watching the condensation on the window as if it could offer answers. He hadn't seen her again since the lobby. No more humming through the wall. No light seeping from under her door. Just a quiet void. He told himself it was fine. People moved. People grew apart. Still, he found himself pausing in the hallway outside her door more than once that week, like his body hadn't quite caught up to the fact that she wouldn't be there anymore. Then, on Saturday morning, he opened his door and nearly stepped on it. A small envelope, cream-colored, tucked under the doormat. No name, no address. Just familiar, looping handwriting. Inside was a note. Short. Simple. "You never know a good thing until it's gone. Don't let that be your life story." That was it. No signature. But he didn't need one. The words hit like cold air against bare skin. Not because they were cruel, because they were true. She hadn't meant it as revenge or guilt. That wasn't Dahlia's way. It was a mirror. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, the note resting in his palm, and noticed the shape of the silence around him. The apartment felt off balance now. Her absence made space for everything she'd once filled, quiet reminders in the smallest places. The mug with the chipped handle she used when she visited. The umbrella she'd insisted he keep. The book of poems she'd lent him 2 years ago that he never got around to reading. He stood up and wandered into the hallway, staring at the bare wall that had once echoed her music. He pressed his fingers against it, absurdly, like he could feel some trace of her there. But it was just drywall. And she was gone. Ethan didn't reply to the note. He couldn't. There was no return address, no number, no clue beyond the whisper of her handwriting. But even if there had been, he wasn't sure what he would have said. So instead, he listened to the echo. It was everywhere now. In the soft creak of his apartment floorboards at night. In the space on the coat rack where her umbrella used to hang. In the absence of her knock during thunderstorms or her knock-knock jokes slipped into text messages that always made him roll his eyes, and then laugh anyway. He scrolled through their old messages one night, lying in bed with the ceiling fan spinning overhead. Most of the conversations were short, ordinary, but there was a warmth to them, like how she'd always added a second question after asking how he was. How was work? And how are you really? Marissa never asked him that. Not once. He noticed other things too. How he never cooked anymore, because no one reminded him that takeout 5 nights in a row wasn't food. How he hadn't been to the little bookstore on Oak Street since Dhalia moved. She used to drag him there on Saturdays for therapy disguised as literature. One day, while reorganizing the closet, he found the birthday card she gave him the year he turned 28. It had a cartoon dinosaur wearing a party hat and said, "You're not old, you're vintage." Inside, in that same looping script she had written, "To the most predictably unpredictable person I know. Thanks for being you, even when you forget who that is." He sat down on the floor and just stared at it. He didn't cry. That would have felt like too much. But something cracked, just slightly. The final shift with Marissa was less dramatic than he expected. No fight. No scandal. Just a slow fade. She called him distant. He called her tiring. They broke up over brunch in late January, both of them relieved and already thinking about the next step. She left behind a bottle of expensive gin and a playlist he never listened to. When she was gone, Ethan didn't feel emptier. Just quieter. Like he'd returned to a place that had been waiting for him. He sat by the window that evening, watching the city breathe in lights and motion, and finally understood something he hadn't before. Love doesn't always come in noise or fireworks. Sometimes it comes in constancy, in the sound of a soft knock at the door, in someone who stays, even when you forget to say thank you. And sometimes, if you're careless, it leaves quietly too, without slamming the door. Spring came late that year. The air still carried the edge of February, but the trees had started blooming anyway, defiant little bursts of pink and white against the gray skyline. Ethan noticed them more than he used to. He noticed a lot of things now. Like how much quieter the building felt without Dahlia's humming. Or how strange it was to have nobody checking if he'd eaten something green lately. Or the way he instinctively still opened 2 windows on Sundays. Out of habit, maybe, or hope. He spent more time alone now, but it was different. Not the numbing kind of alone, the rebuilding kind. He stopped ordering takeout every night. Bought real groceries. Started going on morning runs. Not because anyone told him to, but because he needed the breath, the rhythm, the feeling of his heart pounding for something other than regret. He picked up a sketchbook again, too. It had been years since he'd drawn anything more than a quick doodle in a meeting. But one night, surrounded by old coffee mugs and dusty memories, he pulled the sketchbook out from a forgotten drawer, sharpened a pencil, and started to draw, badly at first. Then slowly, like his hands remembered something his mind had buried. He even tried sketching Dhalia once. Not her face, he couldn't get it right. Just her coat on a hook. Her mug on his windowsill. Her scarf draped over the back of his chair. All the ways she had occupied space without needing to take it. She had filled his life so quietly, so consistently, that he'd mistaken her presence for permanence. And now, every little memory of her was a still frame in his mind. Not loud. Not aching. Just real. One evening, after walking home from work, he passed the cafe where she used to drag him for herbal tea and overpriced lemon bars. He went in, sat at their usual table, and for the first time in months, he didn't look at his phone or try to distract himself with background noise. He just sat there, hands around a warm cup, letting the silence stretch, letting the guilt settle. Not the kind that punishes, but the kind that teaches. Because somewhere in the stillness, he finally understood. He hadn't just lost a person. He'd lost a good thing. The good thing. The rare kind, steady, present kind without reason. The kind most people only find once. And he had let it slip through the cracks while chasing something louder. It was almost exactly a year to the day since she'd left. Ethan didn't notice the date at first. It wasn't circled on any calendar. But his body remembered, something in the air or the light or just the way the city sounded in early spring. He had just come from the animal shelter, where he now spent his Saturdays walking dogs and scrubbing out kennels. It was simple, grounding work. Work that made sense in a way the rest of life often didn't. Juno, a nervous shepherd mix with uneven ears, trotted beside him as they turned onto Oak Street, the same street where he and Dhalia used to wander aimlessly on warm weekends, arguing about whether poetry was overrated. He passed the old bookstore, the one with the faded navy awning and the bell on the door that always jingled a beat too late. He hadn't stepped inside since she left. He wasn't planning to now. Until he saw her. Dhalia. Standing right there in front of the window display, hair shorter, arms crossed loosely, head tilted like she was studying the titles but not really reading them. For a moment he couldn't move. She looked the same and different all at once. Older somehow. Softer. Lighter. She wore a forest green coat, and there was a small canvas tote slung over one shoulder with paint smudges along the seam. Juno let out a soft whine, tugging at the leash. Dhalia turned. Their eyes met. No soundtrack. No dramatic swell. Just the sound of the city rolling by and the quiet weight of recognition landing between them. She smiled, small, unsure but real. Ethan stepped forward. "Hey," he said, like it was a normal day. Like it hadn't been a year of missing her in everything. "Hey," she replied. They stood there for a moment, just being. The world kept moving around them, but something had paused in that stretch of sidewalk. He looked down at Juno, then back up. "I volunteer now. At the shelter. This one's Juno. She's anxious, but getting better." Dahlia's smile grew. "Sounds familiar." They both laughed, awkwardly, warmly. "Want to grab a coffee?" he asked. "Catch up?" She hesitated, but only for a second. "Yeah," she said. "I'd like that." Inside the cafe, the seats had barely changed. The lemon bars were still too sweet. The tea still overpriced. But the silence between them had shifted. It wasn't absence anymore. It was possibility. The cafe windows fogged slightly as the warmth from inside met the cool spring air. Ethan watched Dahlia's fingers curl around her mug, her thumb tracing small, absent-minded circles along the rim, an old habit he hadn't realized he'd memorized. They talked for an hour. Then another. Not everything was said at once. They didn't try to shove a year's worth of silence into a single sitting. But what was shared came simply, like unpacking a box together, gently piece by piece. She told him about Portland, the job she took, the classes she taught, how she started painting again, small landscapes and abstract impressions she hung in a co-op gallery. He told her about the dog shelter, the sketchbook, how he stopped trying to outrun his own restlessness and instead learned to listen to it. There were pauses, but not uncomfortable ones. Finally, as the sun lowered behind the city skyline and the streetlights blinked awake, Ethan leaned forward. "I never thanked you," he said, "for everything you gave me before I even realized you were giving it." Dhalia met his eyes but said nothing, waiting. "And I'm sorry," he added more quietly. "I didn't see it. I thought real love had to be loud to matter." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she smiled, not with forgiveness, but with recognition. "You never know a good thing until it's gone," she said, echoing her own words from a lifetime ago. "But sometimes," she reached out and tapped the rim of his coffee cup with hers. "If you're lucky, it comes back." They walked outside together, the city cool and calm around them. Juno trotted between them, tail swishing, nose up. Ethan didn't know where the story would go next, if they'd fall in love all over again or become something else entirely. But he did know this. He would not let it slip away this time. Not because he was afraid of losing her again, but because now, finally, he understood what it meant to have something good. And better still, to choose it.